Dream of the Red Chamber, Chapter 100.
We are looking at something really monumental today, and I'm just thrilled you are joining us for this. We're opening up a specific devastating sequence today.
Yeah, a really incredible.
From Chapter 100 of the legendary classic, Dream of the Red Chamber. Now, if you are familiar with the text, you know the immense scale of this world. But our mission today is very focused. We are analyzing a profound snapshot of an aristocratic family in absolute, unmitigated structural freefall.
They were just plummeting.
Yeah, plummeting. We're going to examine how severe external pressures, specifically, legal peril, the threat of execution, total financial ruin, how all of that forces these characters into desperate, deeply revealing behaviors.
Because we are catching an ecosystem that has sustained itself on immense privilege, political influence, and just staggering wealth for generations, right at the exact moment the life support gets unplugged.
Right, the plug is pulled.
Exactly. We have a family dealing with a looming autumn execution. We are going to look at financial infrastructure just collapsing in real time, forced marriages being orchestrated behind closed doors, and toxic household manipulation stepping into the void left by feeling authority.
It's so messy.
It is. And the sheer psychological breakdown of the central figures trying to process the disintegration of their reality.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to truly understand the gravity of what is happening in Chapter 100, you have to look past the superficial elements.
Yeah, you really do.
It's so easy to get distracted by the beautiful silk robes, the sprawling courtyards, and the poetry, but we have to look at the machinery underneath the floorboards here.
I am so glad you framed it that way, because while the setting is aristocratic antiquity, we are immersed in an era of emperors, regional commanders, concubines, and sprawling patriarchal estates. The themes we are dissecting today are incredibly modern.
Oh, absolutely.
For you listening right now, the specific bureaucratic mechanics might involve imperial decrees rather than, say, SEC filings, but the human behaviors under pressure are entirely universal.
Yeah, human nature doesn't change.
No, it doesn't. We're observing how families handle sudden catastrophic crises. We're looking at how wealth creates this illusion of insulation from consequences until that illusion just shatters. And we're examining how toxic relationships and predatory behaviors actively thrive in the shadows of systemic collapse.
That is so fascinating. And that brings us right to the door of Jia Zhang, the patriarch of the Jia family. We really need to look at the macro level survival of this family first.
Right, the big picture.
Exactly. Specifically, we are examining the transactional nature of survival. The dynamic here centers on how those at the absolute top of the hierarchy use their dependence as, well, political currency to maintain their own status.
And currency is exactly the right framework there. In this socioeconomic system, people are literally assets to be liquidated when the patriarchal enterprise is facing insolvency.
Man, that's bleak. So let's establish the scene for you guys. Jia Zhang is out in the provinces serving as an official, and he is called into a meeting with a regional commander known as the Jiedu.
Right, a massive deal.
Yeah, this is an incredibly high-ranking military and political figure. So Jia Zhang goes into this meeting, and it stretches on for a really long time. Outside, his servant, a man named Li Shire, is just nervously pacing.
Sweating bullets, basically.
Oh, yeah. The text notes that Li Shire is deeply anxious because the Jia family back home has some serious, quote, famines to deal with. Now, famines is an interesting translation choice here. It's used as a polite euphemism for massive, crippling financial debts and looming scandals.
What's really fascinating here is the linguistic framing. Why use the word famines to describe debt?
Right, why that word?
Well, think about it. In a deeply agricultural society, a famine is an act of God. It's a natural disaster. By referring to their self-inflicted financial ruin and severe mismanagement as a famine, the family subtly removes their own culpability.
Oh, wow. That's a great point.
Right, it implies that their massive debts are just a tragic shift in the weather, rather than the result of generational extravagance. C. Shire knows the weather is turning fatal for the Jia family, which is why he is so desperate for good news from this meeting.
Wow, so it's a total deflection of responsibility.
Exactly.
Okay, so Jia Zhang finally emerges from the meeting, and he tells his servant very casually, oh, everything is fine. The commander just wanted to pass on some regards from a relative, and he mentioned that we are now relatives too.
That single word relatives is the loaded gun in this entire sequence.
Right.
The servant instantly decodes the implication. The Jiedu wants a marriage alliance. He specifically wants to secure Jia Zhang's daughter, the third sister, Tanchun, for his own family. And Li Shire does not hesitate. He aggressively begins encouraging Jia Zhang to agree to this marriage.
While this is happening, we get another crucial piece of the puzzle. Jia Zhang's people back in the capital have been monitoring his political standing. Jia Zhang had been under intense investigation by the Ministry of Personnel for bureaucratic failings.
Huge stakes there.
Right. But word finally comes back. Jia Zhang has entirely escaped punishment. He retains his status, his lucrative position, and his rank.
Unbelievable.
I know. The only person who suffers any consequence is an acting magistrate beneath him, who gets dismissed and totally takes the fall. So Jia Zhang gets to breathe this immense sigh of relief. He's safe.
But to understand the weight of this, we have to really look at how the Ministry of Personnel functioned. They conducted regular, rigorous evaluations of all officials. A poor evaluation didn't just mean a demotion.
Right, it was way worse.
Yeah, it could mean exile, confiscation of family wealth, or worse.
Yeah.
So Jia Zhang surviving this evaluation is a massive victory, but his survival is fragile. He is maintaining his position within a ruthless bureaucracy, and the network that keeps him safe requires constant, heavy maintenance.
And that maintenance requires capital. In this specific transaction, the capital is his daughter, Tanchun. The servant, Li Sher, pushes for this marriage, not because he harbors any, romantic notions about Tanchun and this commander's son being soulmates.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. He pushes for it because he understands the mechanics of their world. This alliance weaves a political safety net. It is a hedge against the investigations that almost took Jia Zhang down.
It's entirely strategic. I mean, the Jidu is a regional military governor with immense civil authority. Aligning the Jia family with his military power provides a buffer against the civil bureaucrats in the Ministry of Personnel.
Because the contrast between Jia Zhang's relief and Tanchun's fate is just staggering.
It really is.
It's like that failing corporation securing a bailout. The CEO keeps his corner office and his stock options, while the lower-level managers in this case, the acting magistrate, are fired to appease the regulators. But to finalize the deal, the CEO hands over his daughter. Tanchun is the collateral that guarantees the merger.
It is a brutal calculus, for sure.
Yeah.
But within the context of their world, it is considered an unquestionable necessity. And we really must examine why the rest of the family assents to this. Because Jia Zhang doesn't just make a unilateral, isolated decision here.
No, he doesn't.
She sends word back to the capital seeking the approval of the matriarchs. That's grandmother Jia, the supreme authority of the inner household, and Wang Furen, Jia Zhang's wife.
Wait, let me challenge you on that idea of assent, because their reaction is deeply conflicted. I mean, grandmother Jia actually cries.
Yeah, she does.
She sheds genuine tears. She laments that the geographic distance is simply too far, and she voices her fear that she will never see Tanchun again before she dies. She clearly has a deep, authentic affection for her granddaughter. This isn't just a heartless boardroom.
You are absolutely right to point out the emotional reality, but, that is precisely what makes the systemic pressure so horrifying. Grandmother Jia's love is real, sure, but her love is fundamentally subordinate to the structural demands of their reality.
Right.
She cries, she grieves, but she still agrees to the marriage. They justify the decision by leaning on a proverb. They say leaves must fall to the roots. It's a naturalistic metaphor designed to completely mask a harsh political transaction.
It is a way of comforting themselves, I think. By framing it as nature, they make it seem inevitable rather than chosen, like they had no say in the matter.
Exactly. The underlying rationale is that children are resources allocated by the family for the survival of the greater whole. Wang Furen points out that girls must be married off eventually anyway, and at least this alliance offers immense status.
True.
The terrifying part is that the individual desires, the safety, or even the geographic proximity of the daughter are entirely irrelevant compared to the political capital her marriage generates.
Man, I want you listening to put yourself in Tanchun's shoes for a moment. Try to really inhabit that space, your entire future, the person you will live with, the region you will be moved to likely hundreds or thousands of miles away from everything and everyone you have ever known is decided in a backroom conversation you were never invited to.
Never even consulted.
Never. And it is framed entirely as a blessing. Your grandmother weeps for you, but she still orders the servants to pack your bags. You are entirely stripped of agency. You are a human shield deployed to protect the family's wealth and status from bureaucratic collapse.
And that absolute lack of agency is the defining characteristic of a dependent within a patriarchal system under threat. When the vessel takes on water, the cargo is jettisoned to keep the captain afloat. Tanchun is exceptionally high-value cargo, so she is traded to a more stable vessel, but she remains fundamentally cargo in the eyes of the macro system.
Wow, cargo, that's heavy. So while Jia Zheng manages to successfully spend his daughter's political capital to save himself over in the Su household, they are finding out what happens when your capital is entirely exhausted.
Yeah, a completely different situation.
Right. We are moving from the Jia family's successful political machinations to their close relatives, the Su family. Here, we witness the terrifying moment when external power collapses and wealth suddenly fails to solve a fatal problem.
This is a phenomenal narrative shift. We transition from a family successfully executing their transaction to survive to a family where the transactions are literally bouncing. The currency they have relied on for generations is suddenly void.
Here is the core situation for the Zhu family. The son, Yu Pan, is sitting in a prison cell, and he is awaiting an autumn execution. He is entirely responsible for a death. His mother, Aunt Su, is in an absolute state of despair.
Understandably.
Right. She has been bleeding the family fortunes dry, bribing every ministry official and intermediary she can find. Her goal was to get the charge reduced from a capital offense to accidental manslaughter.
Just a downgrade to the paperwork, really.
Exactly. She figured she could simply pay off the victim's family, pay the exorbitant fines to the court, and buy her son's freedom. Because this is exactly how she handled his previous crimes. But this time, it failed. The Ministry of Justice reviewed the case, rejected the lesser charge, and reinstated the death penalty.
To fully grasp the magnitude of this, we really need to understand the mechanics of the Ministry of Justice, or the Board of Punishments, during this era. Aunt Shu wasn't just handing bags of coins to a local magistrate. Capital cases had to undergo rigorous review.
They didn't mess around.
No, they didn't. They were subject to the autumn assizes, where cases were ultimately ratified by the emperor himself. Aunt Shu was attempting to use her wealth to influence the clerks and officials who drafted the memorials sent up the chain.
To change the wording.
Precisely. She was trying to buy a change in the legal phrasing, turning an intentional homicide into an affray resulting in death, which carried a redeemable sentence. When the Ministry of Justice rejected it, they were signaling that the Su family no longer commanded the influence necessary to manipulate the imperial bureaucracy.
And alongside this catastrophic legal failure is a complete financial implosion. Aunt Shu hasn't just spent a little pocket money on these bribes. She has drained the foundational infrastructure of their wealth.
Totally drained it.
The text tells us that their pawn shops in Beijing are gone. The family names have been removed from the official merchant registries. One of their most trusted managers has embezzled thousands of taels of silver and vanished from the city. And the news from the south is that their remaining pawn shops have closed due to depleted capital. The wealth isn't just shrinking, it is evaporating.
The mention of pawn shops and taels of silver is crucial context here. Pawn shops in this era were not, the small storefronts we picture today. They were highly capitalized financial institutions that issued loans against collateral.
Like major banks.
Yes, exactly like major banks. They functioned as the primary credit system and the core engine of elite merchant wealth. Losing the pawn shops means the Shu family has lost their mechanism for generating liquid cash.
Wow.
And regarding the embezzled thousands of taels of silver, a single tael was roughly 37 grams of silver. To put that in perspective for you, a common peasant family could live for an entire year on 20 to 30 taels.
Wait, really? 20 to 30 for a whole year?
A whole year. So losing thousands of taels is the equivalent of millions of dollars vanishing overnight. It is systemic financial ruin.
That is just mind-blowing. I have to pause and zero in on the idea of justice here, too, because it is deeply twisted. Notice that no one in the family is pretending Shu Pan is innocent. No one is shouting, "He was framed! He didn't do it!"
Oh, no. They know.
They know exactly what he did. They are simply trying to buy a lesser charge. Aunt Shu is weeping endlessly, day and night. But when you examine her grief, she isn't weeping out of remorse for the victim. She is not mourning the loss of the life her son extinguished.
Not at all.
She is crying because her money is no longer functioning as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Her entire worldview, the fundamental belief that wealth places her family above the law, has just shattered.
It is a profound existential shock. Aunt Shu is experiencing the traumatic realization that systemic privilege has hard limits. But to truly analyze this dynamic, we have to look at the other person in the room,
Hmm.
her daughter Bao-Chai.
Yes.
Because Bao-Chai's response to her mother's frantic grief is arguably one of the most incredible psychological portraits in this entire narrative.
Bao Chai is ice cold in this scene. It is almost jarring.
She's incredibly pragmatic and utterly stoic, while Anshu is flailing, weeping, and railing against the unfairness of the universe. Bao-Chai sits down and outlines exactly why her brother Shu Pan is doomed.
Just lays it all out.
She dissects the causality of his downfall with surgical precision. She reminds her mother that Shu Pan inherited a massive, thriving estate and systematically squandered it. She explicitly brings up a horrific past event, the Jiangling incident, where Shu Pan beat a man to death over a girl, and the family used their influence and wealth to cover it up entirely.
Swept it under the rug.
Exactly. Bushi tells her mother he learned nothing. He operated under the delusion that beating the system once meant he was permanently invincible.
I have to stop you there. Is it really just pragmatism? I mean, some of you listening might hear Bei Chai's reaction and think, this woman is a sociopath, her brother's going to be executed, and she's lecturing her crying mother. Is there a lack of basic human empathy here?
It is a totally valid question. It does feel cold.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is that Bao-Chai is the only character refusing to engage in delusion. In any systemic collapse, you generally witness two types of reactions: those who cling desperately to the illusion of how things should be, and those who immediately begin calculating based on how things are.
That makes sense.
Aunt Sue represents the former. She is paralyzed by the discrepancy between her privilege and her reality. Bao-Chai represents the latter. Her coldness is actually a radical acceptance of the collapse. She recognizes that emotional hysteria will not sway the Ministry of Justice.
She actually delivers this brutal assessment of Yutan's social circle, which highlights her intense grip on reality. She points out that all the men he spent his money on, these people he considered his loyal friends, were just, quote, wine and meat brothers.
Such a great phrase.
Right, they were fair-weather parasites. The second the money dried up and Hu Pan faced real consequences, they abandoned him. And the text notes they didn't just abandon him, they are actively turning around and trying to extort the family in their moment of maximum weakness.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Bao-Chai is enforcing a painful, necessary sobriety. She tells her mother to stop crying over the unfairness of the legal system and start looking at the ledger. She suggests they summon the old accountants to see what fractions of capital are left to scrape together.
She's doing the math.
She's preparing to dismiss the servants. She tells her mother to accept that they are now poor, and that survival requires facing the math, not the tragedy.
It is a staggering contrast. Aunt Sue believes the universe is broken because her bribes were rejected. Bao-Chai realizes the universe is working exactly as it is designed to. They simply ran out of tokens to play the game.
Perfectly said.
She tells her mother, you raised a son who acts like an enemy to you, draining you dry. I mean, she is stripping away all the sentimental family mythology and exposing the raw, ugly truth of their insolvency.
And that raw, ugly truth dictates what happens when external power vanishes, because nature abhors a vacuum. When the patriarch is locked in a prison cell waiting to die, and the matriarch is incapacitated by grief and financial ruin, the internal dynamics of the household don't just become chaotic, they become feral.
Feral is the perfect word for what we see next. We are looking at Shu Pan's immediate household, specifically his wife, Jin Gi. If Bao-Chai is the voice of cold, pragmatic reality, Jin Gi is the embodiment of absolute narcissistic chaos.
Oh, without a doubt. Jin Gi provides a terrifying case study in survival psychology stripped of all moral constraints. Let's set the scene carefully. Her husband, Shu Pan, is in prison, facing almost certain execution. Jin Gi's initial reaction is explosive, performative hysteria.
Oh, it's so over the top.
She bursts into the room screaming. She throws herself against the wooden partition walls, banging her head, her hair flying everywhere. She wails that she doesn't want to live, that she intends to march down to the execution grounds and fight to the death alongside him.
She screams that since her husband is doomed, she is now a single woman and has absolutely no reputation left to protect. She threatens to run out into the public street and flee back to her mother's house. It takes a whole group of servants to physically restrain her and talk her down.
It's quite a production.
Right. On the surface, if you just read the dialogue, it looks like the most intense, passionate grief imaginable.
But the text makes it brilliantly clear that this is entirely performative bereavement.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we get to observe her behavior the moment her audience disperses. Almost immediately, this supposedly suicidal grief pivots into something entirely different. It morphs into a highly calculated, predatory, attempted seduction of her brother-in-law, Suke.
We must break down the psychology of this pivot because it is deeply disturbing, but it is completely logical within her twisted panic framework. Jingi's hysteria is not rooted in grief for her husband. The text establishes that she despised Pan. Their marriage was a battleground.
They hated each other.
Her hysteria is, in reality, a severe panic attack regarding her own loss of status. In the Qing dynasty, the social standing of a widow, especially the widow of an executed criminal in a bankrupt household, was a form of social death.
A total dead end.
She is terrified of stepping into that void, so her raw survival instinct engages. And her strategy is to immediately secure a new host.
And Suke, the brother-in-law, is the nearest, most viable target. The execution of her strategy is just chilling. She utilizes her maid, Baocan, as a spy to monitor his movements. When she learns he might be passing by her quarters, what does this supposedly suicidal, grieving woman do?
That's crazy.
She opens her cosmetics box. She carefully touches up her makeup. She adjusts her garments. She is actively applying lipstick to entrap her brother-in-law while her husband sits on death row.
She waits patiently for a specific moment of vulnerability, too. Her maid informs her that Suke has just returned from a celebration where he was pressured into drinking several cups of wine.
So he's a little buzzed.
Yeah, he is slightly flushed, perhaps a bit off balance. Jingi recognizes this vulnerability. Her naturally arrogant, aggressive demeanor completely dissolves into this sickly sweet, performative, predatory posture. She intercepts him.
In the corridor, right.
Right. She uses the mundane excuse of asking about the wine. And when he politely attempts to excuse himself, she escalates. She physically grabs his clothing, she holds on to him, pulling him close, and begins suggesting that he shouldn't drink too much and end up like his brother, leaving a wife to suffer loneliness as a living widow.
Oh, wow.
She is explicitly propositioning him, suggesting he would serve as a superior replacement so she wouldn't have to face widowhood.
Let me push back on this just to play devil's advocate. Is this pure malice, or is it just the feral panic of a woman who knows society is about to discard her? She is basically saying, hey, your brother is out of the picture. I am available. Let's make a mutually beneficial arrangement.
I see what you mean.
It is incredibly brazen. Shuke is terrified. He is trembling. He begs her, please respect yourself, sister-in-law. But she doubles down, attempting to physically drag him into her room for an important conversation.
Well, it is both feral panic and malice. It is a textbook demonstration of how highly toxic individuals operate the moment normal social guardrails disintegrate. The authority of the family patriarch and matriarch has collapsed, so Jingai feels utterly unconstrained by familial morality or social norms.
Anything goes.
Exactly. She is operating purely on appetite and terror. But what elevates this scene from mere scandalous behavior to genuine tragedy isn't just Jingai's predation of Zuke. It is what happens when her strategy is abruptly thwarted.
Yes, the scapegoating. This is the moment that truly makes your blood boil. So Jingi is physically grappling with Juke. The maid, Balkan, is keeping watch. Suddenly, Balkan issues a warning that someone is approaching and that someone is Shangling. Now, we have to explain Shangling's position here. Shangling is Xu Pan's concubine.
We must be very precise about what a concubine was in this context. A concubine did not have the legal standing or protections of a wife. She was often purchased, effectively functioning within a system adjacent to chattel slavery.
It's so dark.
She was entirely subservient to both the husband and the primary wife. Zhangling is arguably the most innocent, repeatedly abused, and structurally powerless human being in this entire family hierarchy.
Zhangling is simply walking down the corridor, completely oblivious to the seduction occurring in the shadows. But the maid's warning provides Yuke with the split-second distraction he desperately needs. He breaks free from Jingi's grip and literally sprints away.
And here we reach the psychological crux of the sequence. Jingi is consumed by fury that her prey escaped, but she cannot confront Juke directly. She still requires his presence for her long-term survival, and confronting him would expose her own shameful, treasonous behavior.
She can't tell everyone what she was doing.
Right, so she is suddenly holding an immense reservoir of frustrated, shameful, venomous energy, and she requires a receptacle for it.
So she transfers 100% of her hatred onto Xingling.
Precisely. The text explicitly states that she transfers all her hidden resentment onto Zhangling, making a conscious decision to hate her to the marrow of her bones.
Even though Zhangling did nothing.
Zhangling committed no offense. She didn't even witness the encounter clearly. She was startled by the sudden commotion and immediately retreated to her own room. But in Jingyi's distorted reality, shangling is the sole reason her survival strategy failed.
If you're listening to this, I want you to deeply reflect on this dynamic because this is not just ancient history. This is a mechanism that activates every single day in failing corporate structures, in toxic office environments, and in dysfunctional modern families.
Oh, absolutely.
When systemic pressure peaks and individuals operate out of panic and malice, the resulting punishment almost never falls on the guilty party. It inevitably falls on the most vulnerable bystander. The individual with the least structural power absorbs the massive impact of the system's toxicity.
That's spot on.
Shangling just happened to be walking by. She possesses absolutely zero power to retaliate. And she immediately becomes the target of Jingyi's unhinged malice simply because Jingyi requires a safe, powerless target to destroy in order to regulate her own shame.
It is the ultimate defining injustice of a hierarchy undergoing collapse. The weak do not merely suffer the structural loss of wealth or security, they are actively transformed into the emotional punching bags for the strong who are losing their grip on power. Xiangling serves as a sponge for Jingyi's toxicity.
It is heartbreaking, and it forces us to examine how all of this external collapse, political maneuvering, and internal toxicity finally trickles down to the youngest generation.
The ones who are supposed to inherit it all.
Right. The people who were raised to inherit this world are instead completely crushed by it. We are shifting from the malicious survival tactics of characters like Jingyi to the tragic, powerless acceptance of the younger sisters, and ultimately the profound existential crisis of the protagonist, Baoyu.
We are observing the ultimate consequences of these forced marriages, these financial ruins, and these toxic environments. They finally crush the idealistic core of the family.
Let's begin with the sisters. Earlier, we analyzed Tanchun being traded away as a political asset to the Jidu. The matriarch, Wang Furian, is confirming the logistics of this distant marriage. And during this deeply somber conversation, the horrific, violent reality of another sister's marriage comes to light.
Yingchen.
Yeah. The sister's name is Yingchen, and the details revealed here are just gruesome.
The revelation concerning Yingchen completely dismantles the illusion that these aristocratic marriages offer any form of legitimate protection for the women involved. Yingchen was married off to a man who is essentially a monster.
He's awful.
The text reveals that he regularly beats her. He starves her in the freezing cold, and he enforces complete isolation. He explicitly refuses to allow her to visit her family, weaponizing the family's financial ruin against her. He claims that the Jia family squandered his wealth, therefore he owns her entirely and can subject her to whatever cruelty he desires.
And the most horrifying aspect of this is the absolute impotence of the Jia family to intervene. If you are wondering, why doesn't the Jia family just send a carriage and armed guards to bring her back? You have to understand the patriarchal ownership of the era.
Once married, the woman belonged entirely to the husband's ancestral line.
Exactly. The Jia family has lost their political leverage and their wealth, so they have no mechanism to force the husband's hand. When the Jia family sends servants to secretly check on Yingchen, they discover her hiding in a neglected side room, wearing thin, inadequate clothing in the dead of winter.
So sad.
And Yingchen, weeping, tells the servants, "Do not bring me clothes or food. If you bring things, my husband will simply confiscate them for himself, and then he will beat me even more because he will be enraged that I complained to my family." She begs them to simply abandon her to her fate.
She literally tells them to give up on her.
Right. So what does this all mean? The family that once controlled regional politics, the family that previously had the power to bribe the Ministry of Justice, cannot even successfully deliver a winter coat to their own daughter without triggering further abuse. Their power is entirely illusory at this point.
It means the structural armor of the family has entirely disintegrated, and the varied reactions to this disintegration within the household are incredibly revealing.
They really are.
Consider the reaction of Zhao Yinyang. She is Tanchun's birth mother. She is a concubine who has spent her life feeling marginalized, bitter, and subjugated by the primary wives. When she receives the news that her own daughter, Tanchun, is being effectively exiled through this distant political marriage, she does not grieve. She actually gloats. She is thrilled by the news.
She is. She murmurs to herself, "Good riddance. She always looked down on me anyway. Let her go suffer the way Yingchen is suffering." It is astonishingly petty and vindictive.
It is vindictive, but it illustrates a profound sociological point. Systemic oppression breeds intense intrafamily cruelty. Zhao Yinyang has been made to feel so powerless, so structurally degraded by the family hierarchy, that her only remaining source of satisfaction is witnessing those higher up the ladder suffer a fall,
Even her own daughter.
even when the person falling is her own biological child. The toxicity of the system has entirely corrupted the fundamental maternal instinct.
And then, amidst this overwhelming misery, Yingchun enduring torture, Tanchun facing banishment, Zhao Yinyang gloating in the shadows, we arrive at Baoyu. Baoyu is the central figure of the novel, the beloved son, the heir who was supposed to be the protected center of this opulent universe.
He was the golden child.
He is already existing in a state of profound psychological fragility because the great love of his life, Lin Daiyu, has died. And to mentally survive her death, he believes she didn't merely die, but that she transformed into an immortal Taoist fairy and ascended to the heavens. He is desperately clinging to this mystical, romantic fantasy.
He is forced to cling to it because the earthly reality is simply too traumatic for his psyche to process.
Exactly. So Baoyu is sitting in his room, lost in his mystical grief for Daiyu, and he overhears the women discussing Tanchun's impending departure. And the news completely breaks him. He collapses onto his bed in tears.
It's his breaking point.
He realizes with sudden, terrifying clarity that every single young woman in his life, his entire chosen family, his entire insulated world of poetry, beauty, and companionship is being systematically eradicated. Daiyu is dead. His older sister has passed away. Yingchun is being actively tortured. Tanchun is being banished to the frontier.
His breakdown in this moment is not merely sadness. It is a profound existential crisis.
Yeah.
He asks a devastating, unanswerable question. He says, why am I the only one left? Why are all these sisters being violently scattered, leaving me alone? Why can't we all just remain together until I turn to ash?
He wants to freeze time. He wants to reside in an internal, unchanging garden where no one is forced to grow up, no one is forced into a political marriage, and no one has to confront the brutal economic and political realities of the adult world.
This raises an important question, and it is a question the text answers directly through the character of Bao Chai, the hyper-pragmatist who was calculating the remaining pawnshop assets while her mother wept.
Oh, how could I forget?
She steps right into the center of Baoyu's existential crisis, and she delivers the harsh, uncompromising voice of socialization.
She offers absolutely zero comfort. She essentially tells him to snap out of his delusion.
She does. She challenges him directly, asking, do you honestly believe all these women can simply remain in this house with you until you are old? Do you believe the world revolves around your personal desire for companionship? She points out the inevitable structural reality of their era.
Which is that they have to leave.
Exactly. Women must marry. Families must disperse. It is the inescapable law of their society. And then she delivers this incredibly sharp, devastating critique of his entire identity as a scholar. She says, you read books and study. The whole point of learning is to understand reason, to comprehend how the world actually functions, but instead you are utilizing your imagination to become more delusional and confused.
Ouch. That is a direct, fatal strike to Baoyu's core identity. He fancies himself a highly sensitive, elevated scholar, and she is telling him he is essentially a man-child hiding from the truth.
It really highlights the tension.
It does. This incredible tension between Baoyu's romantic, stagnant ideal where love and art are sufficient for survival, and Bao Chai's inevitable structural reality, where people are resources, alliances must be forged, and survival requires immense sacrifice. Baoyu utilizes the myth of Daiyu turning into an immortal fairy to cope because the earthly reality Yingchun's bruised face and Tanchun's forced march into the unknown is simply too agonizing to process. He lacks the psychological architecture to integrate the cruelty of the world into his understanding of life.
And Bao Chai is forcing him to look directly at that cruelty. She represents the system demanding that he finally grow up and take his designated place within it, even as that very system is visibly crumbling around them.